Okay, so today I want to expand on one of the beings mentioned during the Vecna entry. After telling his story, I went on to do some more reading and found some links between the Vecna story and our world. Initially, I thought this character was added to the Vecna story as a way to bring the story to life, but it turns out this character is very real. So let's dive into the life and secrets of one of the most vile villains in the Forgotten Realms. Acererak, also called the Devourer, the Lord of Unlife, and Acererak of the Scarlet Robes, is a powerful lich best known as the creator of an infamously deadly dungeon known as the Tomb of Horrors. Once a wizard of a long-forgotten era and a cleric of some forgotten god, Acererak has devoted his existence to the secret of immortality. It's hard to distinguish the difference between the truth and fanciful tale, but I'll go through all I've read on the being, and maybe in the process we can uncover some truth amongst the lies and exaggerations. So many years ago, there existed an ancient conjurer on the planet Earth. One day, the wizard was attempting to recite the rites needed to summon a Balor by the name of Tarnham, but unfortunately for the conjurer, he was quite out of his depth. The Balor was far beyond his ability to control, and it broke free. Crashing through the laboratory, the Balor devoured the conjurer and then went on to forcibly conceive a Cambion son by impregnating one of the wizard's servant girls, named Cassethri. Acererak's mother miraculously survived her son's birth, but barely a decade later she was murdered by a torch-wielding mob, assumedly for giving life to this half-demon child. But while his mom was put to death, Acererak escaped the same fate and was rescued by none other than Vecna. In fact, Vecna's advisors told him at the time to just outright kill the child, but Vecna would kill them instead and take on Acererak as an apprentice of sorts. Acererak would later cite this event with his mother as what inspired him to undertake the study of necromancy and set upon a path of revenge against the entire human race. Even then, 10-year-old Acererak hated life, looking forward to becoming undead like his master. As mentioned in the previous entry on Vecna, during Vecna's siege of Fleeth, the Lich was severely wounded and rescued by Acererak. Following the rescue, Vecna would subsequently promote Acererak to his inner circle. Within the lore, it's unknown if Acererak was present when Cass the Bloody-Handed betrayed Vecna during his rites of ascension. However, it's known that at some point afterwards he moved to a land called the Vast Swamp. While alive there, Acererak built a subterranean temple complex in the name of Orcus and buried its architect and all of its workers within. Eventually, Acererak succumbed to the lure of lichcraft and had himself entombed in a labyrinthine temple where he committed himself to his studies and, eventually, demi-lichdom, abandoning his body for the planes beyond. During his research, Acererak discovered the existence of Moyle, the city that waits. Moyle was a bright place, warmed by a sun and filled with ornate statuary and polished marble. The brightness of the city, however, did not stop its citizens from dark pursuits. In their youth, they even worshipped Orcus himself. Moyle was then wrested from the world of Renai by Orcus and linked to the negative energy plane. Within Moyle, Acererak had constructed a tower known as the Sundered Tower, and it's here that he would go on to imprison and torture some of the adventurers who dared to stand against him. Eventually, though, Acererak would tire of this and return to his other schemes, but not before leaving a true simulacrum of himself to hold power in his stead. Acererak by then had entered into the service of the Demon Prince, and taking advantage of his authority and Orcus's cult, he ordered the construction of vast crypts, including the site which would later become the Tomb of Horrors. After pursuing numerous avenues of research to extend his lifespan, an aging Acererak finally settled on lichdom. Retreating to within his tomb, the Lich Acererak willingly failed to maintain the soul energy necessary to retain his physical state, and he degraded to a pile of lich dust and a single gem-encrusted skull. This new form would still allow him to project his spirit throughout the multiverse, where he carried on an epic campaign of exploring multiple worlds, establishing deadly dungeons, and acquiring artifacts. I actually believe that this was the moment where Acererak discovered Toril among many other dimensions, and this was where I discovered the link between the Vecna story and our realms. So apparently the idea is that he could gain more power by traveling the planes and bring it back when his demi-lich skull consumed a soul and caused him to wake up, as it were. In a sense, he gained more power by becoming briefly even closer to death than he was already, at least in theory. One of Acererak's plans involved luring powerful adventurers to numerous highly lethal dungeon lairs of his own devising scattered across worlds, including a pocket dimension of his own creation. Acererak intended to steal away the great souls of any individuals powerful enough to defeat his dungeons, and use these to empower a ritual allowing him to merge his consciousness with the entire negative energy plane, giving him the ability to take control of every single undead in the multiverse. Unfortunately, he underestimated the ability of the adventurers he lured to him, and they destroyed his physical form and banished his spirit to the distant ether. Acererak was presumed gone forever, with only a faint vestige of his former form accessible to esoteric users of pact magic. However, realizing that his creator had been destroyed, the Acererak simulacrum used the ancient arcane engines in the Sundered Tower to become a real entity unto himself at the cost of hundreds of souls. However, he found himself unable to leave the tower and instead set his sights on using the machine to ascend to demi-lichdom. Masquerading as his creator, the simulacrum manipulated undead and living cultists and used them to spread rumors to lure adventurers to the Sundered Tower in order to capture their souls. This plan worked for years until the simulacrum had nearly completed his ascension. However, one victim managed to escape and alerted other heroes to Acererak's scheme. Presumably, those heroes managed to storm the Sundered Tower and destroy the simulacrum. However, decades after his destruction, the true Acererak managed to return through sheer force of will. Immediately he began crafting a series of great eldritch engines, elaborate machines designed to focus magical energy. His goal was to absorb the power of all dead and forgotten gods, allowing him a level of power that surpasses even deities. To construct his greatest astral engine, a massive device intended to draw the power of dead gods to his own phylactery, Acererak stole gemstone keys from the crown of Nerul, god of the dead. He activated the device for several weeks before it was disabled by another band of adventurers who defeated a massive crystal golem possessed by Acererak's spirit and destroyed his phylactery. Acererak's life force once again survived though, but he was not able to recreate his phylactery quickly. As a last resort, he returned to the original Tomb of Horrors and acquired the Eye of Vecna, replacing one of the soul gems in his eye sockets and making one last stand in the grand throne room of the Tomb of Horrors. Acererak was once again destroyed, however. Then, at some point in the 15th century DR, through means unknown, Acererak's quest led him to the forbidden city of Omu in Chult here on Toril. The priests in Omu were routinely being killed in a series of death traps to appease their 9 trickster gods. This impressed Acererak, so he would go on to kill all 9 gods, enslave the people, and force them to build a dungeon beneath the cliffs called the Tomb of the 9 Gods. Acererak then slaughtered all the slaves by using them to test the deadliness of his dungeon and turned a few into undead and flesh golems, and then continued on his way. Prior to arriving in Chult, Acererak had somehow come across a being known as an Atropal in the negative energy plane. Atropals are a race of unfinished immortals modeled after the gods who spontaneously rise as undead abominations. Acererak had carried the stillborn being to Chult and built an eldritch machine called the Soulmonger, which captured the souls of the dead from all across Faerun and fed them to the Atropal to restore its strength. Acererak's plan was to feed the undead godling until it grew powerful enough to become a god in its own right, at which point he would unleash it upon Toril to destroy the planet. His precise reasons, however, are unknown, but I suppose it's not a stretch to assume he just craved destruction. Unfortunately for him, and despite having a sphere of annihilation at his command, Acererak was once again defeated by a small band of powerful adventurers. His phylactery was intact in a private demiplane hidden from even the gods, and it's believed that he still exists in one form or another. But after this, the trail runs cold. 1480 DR is incredibly recent given how far back Acererak's story seems to go, so I don't think we've seen the last of him. Not by a long shot. I glossed over the times Acererak's plans were foiled by adventurers, but I want you to realize that each and every time he was thought to be destroyed, he'd come back decades later through sheer force of will. While researching Vecna, Acererak seemed to just be a small footnote, but after reading up on him, his vile actions easily rival those of his old master. And while they're currently not working together, gods help us if they decide to come together with their full might and descend upon Toril itself. But as my pupils, I'll keep you updated if anything else comes across my desk in regards to these beings, both Acererak and Vecna. Okay guys, that covers Acererak of the Scarlet Robes. This guy has apparently been rampaging across the multiverse for almost his entire existence. One of the most vile villains for sure. But anyways, thanks for listening to this entry everyone. This is your guide signing out. Be safe, take care, and happy trails.